All right, so this may be the first video that some people are watching, maybe this the second or third video that other people are watching. All right, so I'm still gonna put in some reminders and things about notes as we go along and kind of things about the videos in case this is the first one you're watching. So this video is about multiplying and dividing fractions. And actually we multiplied fractions in the previous video. All right, so you might actually already kind of know how to do that. Dividing might be one that you still need brushing up on. All right, so one big reminder, all right, make sure as you're watching videos, you take notes. There's two ways you can take notes. All right, you can use the exact slides that I'm writing on. These are all available on the Google Doc. Or you can print these out yourself and then write on them. That way you don't have to write up a bunch of stuff like where all the definitions are already printed there. So that's one option. I'm not gonna print them all out myself because I'll just use up too much paper, but if you wanna do that, you're welcome to. And of course, the other option is to just handwrite them. There are some helpful things throughout the videos. For instance, they're all gonna start with a title. So that's something you can write really big at the top of the page. All right, this one's about multiplying and dividing fractions. You can also put the number for the learning objective. All right, those types of things. Another thing that's helpful if you're handwriting the notes is most of them, the slides have a title, so I can kind of help you separate out your notes into different pieces. You'll be able to label examples that I did versus label examples that you did, and so on. All right, so just make sure you're kind of using these slides to help you take notes. All right, the great thing about multiplying fractions is you do not need a common denominator. So we kind of solved this in the previous video about adding is you multiply to get a common denominator. So you don't need a common denominator to multiply. You just simply multiply across the top and multiply across the bottom. All right, so here's our first example. All right, these are the ones that I kind of work through. All right, multiply the following fractions: 2 over 3 times 6 over 5. When we're multiplying, we see the multiplication symbol, we just go straight across. 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15. And one thing you're going to have to do a lot when you're multiplying fractions is then simplify your final answer. So you want to see, is there anything in common between 12 and 15? All right, they're both divisible by 3. So I can cancel out that factor of 3 and get my final answer. This is equal to 4 over 5. And again, make sure you can't simplify any further. In this case, 4 and 5 don't have anything in common, so that's our final answer. All right, another thing to remember is if you're multiplying a whole number by a fraction, which actually happens quite a bit, is that any whole number is just that number divided by 1. So 3 is the same thing as 3 divided by 1. 1 doesn't change stuff. So then I can just multiply the tops, all right, the numerators and the bottoms. That's going to give me 6 on the top, 5 on the bottom, and that's my final answer. All right, so if you have a whole number, just rewrite it as a fraction by doing that number divided by 1. Right, so if this is your first video, this is your first time seeing this, is that when you're watching the videos, there'll be slides called Your Turn, which is basically you trying the exact same type of problem I just tried to see if you understood it and can do it yourself. So the video will kind of pause itself. It'll give you some time to try the problem. And when the video picks back up after you click done or whatever, you'll see the way I solve the problem, and you can kind of compare and make sure you're understanding this as you go. So it's a really good way as you watch the video to kind of see, are you understanding it, or do you need to ask for help? Right, so make sure you're trying these on your own so you can kind of see where you're at. And here's my solution. All right, 2 times 10 is 20. 5 times 4 is also 20. So you get 20 over 20. And whenever you have a number over itself, they cancel out and you just get 1. So the final answer for this one is just 1. All right, so now we're going to talk about dividing. Again, the title is there to kind of help you with your notes. So now we're talking about dividing. All right, and when we divide, we're going to use, and this is probably something to write nice and big in your notes, keep, change, flip. All right, so keep, change, flip, KCF, almost KFC, but not quite. All right, so keep, change, flip is how we divide fractions. Generally, we won't see it with this little division sign. This is making really obvious kind of how the fractions are going to be divided. All right, but what does keep, change, flip mean? This just means we go left to right. We're going to keep 2/3. I'm just going to rewrite 2/3. I'm going to change. So the next thing I see is the division sign. I'm going to change division to multiplication. And I'm going to flip the next thing I see, which is that last fraction. So I'm going to flip 4 over 9 to 9 over 4. So this process is just changing a division problem into a multiplication problem. And we just learned how to do multiplication across the numerator, across the denominator. 2 times 9 is 18. 3 times 4 is 12. It turns out both those numbers are divisible by 6. So my final answer is 3/2. All right, one thing I haven't mentioned in a while. All right, this is 3/2. One thing a lot of people do, especially if they're coming directly out of middle school, is rewrite 3/2 as 1.5. Right. And it's true, 3/2 is 1.5, especially if you put it in a calculator, you'll see it's 1.5. All right, but we don't want to write our fractions as these mixed numbers like this, because once we start doing equations and things, is this 1.5? Is this 1 times 1/2? All right, this is a little confusing when you're doing algebra, so we don't want to do this anymore. We just want to keep it as this fraction, even though the numerator at the top is bigger. All right, so our final answer here is just 3/2. All right, so a dividing problem is just basically one step, and then it's a multiplication problem. All right, so here's one for you to try on your own. All right, do 4 over 5 divided by 2 over 3. And here is my solution. So we keep 4/5 the same. Division changes to multiplication, and we flip 2/3 to 3/2. And then multiply the numerators, that's 12. Multiply the denominators, that's 10. And then both those are even, so I pull out those 2's to get my final answer of 6 over 5. All right, so again, it's a good way to check. If your answer is 6 over 5, chances are you understand all this and you can do it. If your answer is not 6 over 5, try to compare, see where you made a mistake. And if you can't kind of figure it out, that's when you should call me over and I can help you out. And then the final thing that'll happen in all the videos, almost all the videos, is there'll be a multiple choice question. It's just a kind of real quick way for me to look at the roster of the class, kind of see how many people are getting questions right for this topic, how many are getting wrong, and I can kind of intervene if kind of maybe everyone gets a question wrong or something like that. Either I didn't teach it well enough or I put the answer in wrong. All right, but try the question, pick the answer you think is correct. Chances are if you get an answer that's not any of them, maybe retry it because I'm pretty sure the answer is always there. All right, one other thing to be careful with is Edpuzzle will automatically shuffle the answer. So if you think the answer is B, it might not always be the second choice because it'll kind of shuffle the answers to random places. So if you think the answer is B, make sure you actually click the answer that's B, not always the second one. All right, so this is the way the videos are always going to go. Me explaining some stuff, doing an example, you do your own example, going on to the next type of thing, and so on. And they'll all end with this multiple choice question. All right, now that you're done the video, all right, you just did your video and your notes. And the next thing you're gonna do is go do practice. So there's the printed out practice problems in the classroom. So go work on the practice, right, and see if you understand everything and kind of get comfortable with the material. And then once you're comfortable with all the practice problems, that's when you do your skill check. All right, so make sure you let me know as early as possible if you have questions. All right, but kind of work on practice, figure out if you understand this, and you can do the skill check to move on to the next thing.